dual tracks. In this room this afternoon, we're going to hear some enterprise deployment best practices. We're really lucky to have had that great presentation from Microsoft this morning from Dana and Pamela on the leadership that Microsoft is showing with regard to moving passwordless, but how do you actually do that? So we're really lucky to have another session from Microsoft now on just that topic. So what are the do's and don'ts of passwordless? So please, let's welcome Tarek Dawood and Libby Brown from Microsoft. Please take it away.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Grab the clicker here. Thanks, Megan. I'm Libby Brown. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft, shepherding our passwordless story for Azure Active Directory. You can kind of think of me as like the rallying party for our enterprise stack. Tarek?
And hi, everyone. My name is Tarek Dawood. I'm also a program manager at the Identity Division. I am on the customer success engineering part, where we're part of engineering, where we take what the amazing stuff that Libby and many of the other folks build, and we try to deploy it with customers. We learn, and we bring them back the learnings so we can improve. And today, we're going to talk about some of these learnings we saw. We'd love to hear from you, those of you who are either customers, partners, trying to get others to deploy passwordless. What are you seeing? So let's keep this a two-way conversation. The high-level agenda we're going to use today is we're going to give a structure of what we think a good enterprise passwordless deployment journey looks like, obviously open for feedback. We're going to also touch on some common don'ts and mistakes that some customers do, or partners in their thinking of how to tackle passwordless. And then obviously we'd love to hear from you. The typical passwordless journey that we imagine looks something like this. I'm going to cover the first 3 points, and Libby's going to take you through the last 3 points. Think of the first 3 as things you should do before you start talking to your end users about passwordless. And the bottom 3 are things you're going to have to do with your users. And so we're going to go through each one of them in dedicated slides. So the first one is be cloud ready, right? So that means there's a certain implicitness in the fact that FIDO 2.0 and FIDO is built off on top of WebAuthn, right? In that your IDP, if it only speaks with LDAP binds on 389, it's not covered in that paradigm. So if you have legacy apps that speak things that predate HTTP and HTTPS, you're not covered in that paradigm. So one of the things you have to start thinking about is how do you shift your applications and your identity to the cloud. So step 1 is you have to have a presence in a modern IDP. We recommend a cloud-based IDP, well, putting aside our own, but we recommend that you go to a modern IDP of some sort that supports WebAuthn, that supports these new flows, so that you're in a good position. Your identities have to be there first. Step 1, like, do you even have a presence or a plan to get to a modern identity provider that can speak WebAuthn, that can implement these protocols and these standards or not? If your identity solution is one that's still rolling out SAML support in 2022, you're in trouble. You have to think about an identity provider that moves faster than that. So that's baseline plumbing before you even start thinking about a passwordless journey. I know there are ways to do passwordless using older protocols. Some of them are not very phish resistant on older things. So we're hoping to move to the latest and greatest. We're hoping to move to where it's truly phish resistant by design. Those of you who understand CTAP and WebAuthn understand why FIDO 2.0 is passwordless, phishing resistant by design, inherently built into the protocol. So that's step 1. As I mentioned, step 2 is applications. So get the identities in to an identity provider that can do these modern protocols. And then step 2 might seem obvious, but it's actually a lot of work, is to get your applications into a modern state where they speak to this modern identity provider. There are going to be compromises along the journey. Some of them you can rewrite. Some of them, the owner, you purchase them out of the box and the owner is long gone and passed away many years ago. And so you're going to have to find a way to, can you, for example, use reverse proxy technologies? For example, in our product, we have integrations with F5. We have our own app proxy technology. Can you do things like that that can intercept legacy calls, switch them into modern calls, and then show the end user the modern experiences, and then under the hood translate back? There are things you can do on each of these levels. You don't have to necessarily rewrite every app, There are mitigating things you can do in the interim, but you definitely have to bring the authentication to this modern identity provider that you chose, because it is the one that can do the passwordless. When it's time to do an interactive auth, when the application says, I need you to proof up, I need you to do MFA, I need you to show me who you truly are, and the user needs to actually put in a credential into the system, you want them to be talking to the modern IDP. And so step 2 is definitely your applications. You have to start thinking about it. You have to start breaking them down, inventorying them, thinking through that. Step 3 is platform readiness. This may not, this is one of the ones where sometimes it catches customers off guard, so just make sure you think through it. So what is going to be your story? How are you going to meet your end users on the various platforms that they use? So for example, their steady state primary workstation. In the PC world, from the Microsoft side, we have Windows Hello for Business as a built-in platform authenticator. We can tell you the story of Microsoft. I think we've told it a few times on this stage, where basically our employees today, they just open the laptop, looks at their face, lets them in. Nobody types a password. Nobody has typed a password on a day-to-day basis in Microsoft now for over 3 years. And most of us actually forget our passwords. In fact, some of us are in a pilot where we have scrambled our password on premises in AD, and we actually don't, we haven't had to type it in over a year now. Just to prove that we don't really have a dependency on. There's no legacy expense reporting app somewhere that causes you once a year to have to use your password. So on a day-to-day basis, a steady state machine that's mine, that's dedicated to me, Windows Hello for Business works very well. But if I have a shared kiosk at the back of this room, Windows Hello for Business starts to not work very well. It has limitations on the number of profiles, the number of users who can context switch on the machine. If I had 2 kiosks, now people have to scan their face here, and they have to go scan their face there. They're not bootstrapped immediately between the 2 machines. We have work to do there, but maybe Windows Hello for Business or a built-in platform authenticator may not be necessarily the best option. Maybe you start thinking about FIDO keys that they can basically use to plug in whichever kiosk they go to, and it automatically authenticates them passwordlessly into the OS itself. Another option you have to think about is, what about those users of yours, or information workers, who day-to-day use their mobile to get their mail, right? Check their calendar, respond quickly to messages on Slack. Those folks, what's their passwordless strategy? Do you really want them to pull out a FIDO key and stick it into the phone? And so, for example, we have on our side, we implemented phone sign-in with Authenticator app. There are other technologies. But think about, what is going to be, do you really want them to type the tiny, tiny UPN with a tiny, tiny keyboard, and then the very long password with a tiny, tiny keyboard? Or do you have a better option for them? And so that's what is going to be your strategy for these. Microsoft has offerings in all 3, but there are other vendors also do. Obviously, we don't make FIDO keys, for the record, just nobody misquote me on this one. We support FIDO keys and external security keys. So just plan for it. So for example, Windows Hello for Business, you have to be, we recommend you're on at least 1809, 1903 or greater, just to have the best, latest, and greatest bits for Windows Hello for Business deployment. If you're going to use FIDO keys to unlock the screen, we recommend you be on 2003, or the spring release of 2020. For FIDO keys, for example, do you have the right FIDO key that works for your end users? Or do some of your end users have a problem with biometrics? We think they're amazing, but do you need to, are you going to go down the path of explaining how FIDO does not actually beam your biometrics to the cloud and explaining that to them? Or do you want to go down the other path of, you know what, I'm just going to use a FIDO form factor that looks like a smart card and you put a PIN. And you as an end user don't have to worry about biometrics. These are all choices in your hand. But you have to think through them instead of being surprised 60% through your deployment that the folks in France or Germany are uncomfortable with biometrics and they refuse to roll it out. So think through all these things ahead of starting the deployment. Cool. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Libby, to cover the user journey aspects.
Thanks, Tarek. So we're just going to talk through some of the considerations as you think through those traditional joiner, mover, leaver scenarios. And at the top of this cycle of someone onboards to your company, really for most of our enterprises is not the start of their journey. It's adding credentials to the users they already have in the system. How do you go from, I have my password and maybe I have password plus MFA. If you saw earlier conversations, not a lot of our users have MFA these days. We're working on it. But how do you get your users to add that next credential? Is that next credential going to be an MFA method? Is it going to be a passwordless method? Think about what users are you going to start with? Are you going to start with your IT department, a small finance group where they have a known set of apps and devices and they're kind of easy to go to? And then think about what campaigns can you run? How do you get your users to adopt? We've put out emails that you can customize to send out an email campaign saying, hey, we're doing MFA, go set up your, pick your cred. Or, let's start you on your road to FIDO, here's how you go and set this up. So it's really becomes this concept of how do you drive these campaigns to get your users educated and up to speed on their new credentials. Once you've identified your existing base of users and how you do that, it becomes a little easier to think about what are you going to do for your new employees. For example, Microsoft, I'm working with our IT department to define that new situation of when a person shows up at our new employee orientation on day one, what do they do and what are the instructions that they get? For us, we get a temporary access pass, and we are told, here's how you go set up your passwordless phone sign in the Microsoft Authenticator app, and from there you can go set up every other cred. But that's just one way to think about your employee's journey from how do they go from nothing to hopefully multiple strong credentials, multiple passwordless credentials. Because if you now think about that mover-leaver scenario, what happens when they lose them? We always encourage our users to have more than one credential, more than one passwordless credential, so that account recovery isn't, hey, call the help desk and the help goes, I'm sorry, who the heck are you? But no, you have a method to fall back to. In the middle, what you're seeing is, and this is what we're also seeing from our customers, is great, I've got my FIDO key, and it's sitting in my drawer, and I'm just going to type my password because that's what I'm used to doing. How are you going to get your users to start using the stronger method that they already have? You can do things like put forth a conditional access policy that forces them to use their passwords. You can run reports, name and shame, take your pick of how you think about making your organization more secure through their daily activities. Another thing that I will call out is using your passwords less is also going passwordless. Stop prompting your user every time they open their machine or move a new tab. Think about how you can make passwords appearing in front of your users seem very odd and unnatural. As Tark mentioned, I don't know my password. I haven't known it. If I see a prompt that looks maybe like an Office 365 page asking for my password, I know that that is a phishing attempt. And then account recovery, I think this is something that we as an industry are really starting to wrap our heads around. And if you find me in the hallways afterwards, I love to hear what your organization is doing. But this is a problem. You don't want someone to be able to call up and say, I'm John in accounting and I lost my password and I lost my FIDO key, set me up again. How do you know it's really John from accounting? If they have a FIDO key, can you make them prove it? How do you do that unphishable? And I will say that we have a ways to go as Microsoft, and I think as an industry, we've got a lot of work there. The work in identity verification is really exciting in that space, and verifiable credentials. So I have a quick demo just to show, we at Microsoft, we love showing you that some of this stuff is real. And this is how easy it is to take our new temporary access pass and set up Windows Hello for Business. This should not be any challenge for your user if on day one you hand them a laptop that can be Azure AD joined to your organization and you give them a temporary access pass. So this was done by our admin, Lee, who can give himself his own temporary access pass. We don't necessarily recommend that as the way to hand them out. But so he entered his username, he entered his temporary access pass instead of his password. That temporary access pass is going to expire in a half an hour, so it's not going to live longer than how long it takes to set up a new Windows device. But you can see right in the middle of that out-of-box setup flow in Windows 10, it's going to ask him for his PIN. And now he has Windows Hello once he sets up his PIN. He's going to have that strong Windows Hello for Business WebAuthn-based credential to use as a platform authenticator each and every time he signs into that Windows device. And in fact, you can see him, he's going to log out and log back in with that PIN, and then he will complete the demo, and you will see just how easy it was to do that. Microsoft, almost all of our new PCs are Azure AD joined. Again, going back to what Tarek said, really think about how can you take advantage of this transition of the cloud to make all of your processes easier, not just moving passwordless. So that's our demo. And our goal is to make sure that you can go from passwordless credential to passwordless credential, whether it's using Windows Hello for Business to then set up a FIDO key, or using your FIDO key to set up Windows Hello, creating that passwordless authentication account in your Auth app. Think about how your users are going to be able to go from one to the next, depending on which device they are using. This last slide is for the industry professionals here in the room who are doing this for your org. Measure your impact. This is how you get to prove you are adding security and impact for your company. Start with that baseline of what matters. Do you know what your current help desk costs are? Do you know what your attack rates are, your phishing rates? Start diving into those logs and seeing what you find. And then track your key results as you move on to your passwordless journey. You know, hey, if your pilot group all of a sudden is calling the help desk less for password resets, but more because they lost their FIDO key, you know, that's something that you can stop at a pilot phase, measure, make changes, and then move forward. If your key result is, you know what, we want to make this easier for our users, think about how you can measure that success rate. Are you seeing more people able to log in? Are you seeing fewer calls to your help desk on, hey, I'm stuck and I can't access SharePoint, or you know, that app that they're trying to get to? And then last, toot your own horn. What we're seeing from some of our customers is, hey, we had this really successful pilot, and then we told our management about it, and they thought that was super cool, so they said, go do more. It's really using that momentum and generation of getting started and moving ahead, and then sharing their knowledge in your organization to drive that more success and create that positive flywheel. Frankly, I'm sure the FIDO people would love to see more people come up here next year and talk about how they did this in their own work. All right, so we'll be real quick on the don'ts, and I think you've kind of picked this up. Don't get in your user's way. If you have that person in your organization who's like, I just got a new key and I want to use it, let them turn on your FIDO policies. Let them set up those security methods. They will also be those people who go forth and tell their friends how great they are. Don't plan on flipping a switch. Passwords have been around for well longer than I've been alive. It's going to take a long time to get them back out of the system. So figure out on this journey of going passwordless, what are your milestones? How do you accrue value along the way? And how do you prove that value to keep making progress along your journey? And then lastly, don't expect perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Passwords, like I just said, are going to be there for a long time. Using your passwords less, using MFA more is still a win. You are still generating value for your business and making everyone more secure. So just a reminder, and Pam and Dana had much better charts on this earlier this morning, but we are in a situation of a rising tide lifts all boats. What we are seeing is that our companies that are trying FIDO keys are also doing Windows Hello for Business. And if they're doing Windows Hello for Business, they are also trying out FIDO keys. They're getting that message that, you know, the more credentials, the merrier, and we're really just starting to see this wave come up of use. I will point out that these are orders of magnitude difference, but it is still that general journey of up and right.
And Lydia, if I can add, like, we're here to tell you that these are real deployments. Like, we had an exciting talk with a customer last week that had 400,000 Windows Hello for Business users, 90,000 passwordless phone sign-in users, over 5,000 FIDO users for privileged account. This is a done deployment already. It's happening already. It's huge enterprises, and so we're here to kind of like, yes, we can't quite show you the exact numbers, but there are real big, huge customer deployments. I'm hoping to bring you next time actual customers to stand on stage.
And so we'll pause there, and I hope we've gotten some questions online. Feel free to go to the mics if you have any questions about what we've talked about or input. Megan, I don't know if we're getting questions. And then I will also leave it with some resources while we answer.
This is it. This is your chance. They're here.
Or
Okay.
find
Can
us
you come
after.
to the mic or? Yeah. Just because our remote folks can't hear anything unless we're at the mic.
So one of the questions our organization has is, is Hello for Business truly passwordless? Are there any scenarios where you can still use a password?
So yes, depending on your definition of where you're using the password. Actually, the woman sitting right to your side is probably the best answer for that one, as she owns our Passwordless story on a Windows device. So it depends on how you have the device set up. If it is Windows Hello for Business, we are creating the private key in the TPM and storing the public key to the cloud. And then throughout the device, depending on what app you're accessing and what protocols that app uses, we can take advantage of that private key. Now, if you're using an app that's still, using a legacy protocol that involves a password stuffer, that's in there as well.
I would say if you unlock the OS with a passwordless credential, FIDO or Windows Hello for Business, then under the hood, all the Kerberos things you need from your environment, file shares, domain controller, or whatever, is using CertAuth, which is just like smart cards. It's no less passwordless than smart cards. It's fairly secure, and the user's password is not flying under the hood somewhere. Like, there's no password stuffing happening. That's kind of a big differentiator between Windows Hello for consumers, as most end users know it at home, and kind of Windows Hello for business. But one of the complaints is, hey, I finished the Windows Hello for Business wizard that you saw Lee go through, and then next time I unlock my PC, I still type in my UPN and password as if nothing happened. We are doing some policy stuff too. Today you can hide the credential provider. There's a good chance you'll get phone calls, where's my password box? Or my Windows Hello for Business camera is broken, how do I break through? They don't understand PIN fallback, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But we're looking into ways to nudge. For example, a user logs in with a password and the OS tells them, hey, did you know you're supposed to do this other thing? Stuff like that. I know customers have done it with custom scripting on Intune, SCCM, that kind of stuff. But we're also looking at ways maybe the product can nudge the users.
Okay, and I have one other quick question.
Sorry.
So you mentioned right there at the end that they used FIDO for elevated access accounts, but Windows Hello for primary accounts or product. Can you explain why? And then I'll step away and let other people.
Generally, we recommend separation of privilege in general. On-prem, like your information worker account, should not be your privileged account. The one you can get email on, malware and stuff on, should not be. So they're day-to-day.
No, yeah, I understand that you should have two separate accounts, but why did somebody choose to use FIDO for the elevated access? Is there something better about FIDO than Hello for Business? Is that why they chose to use FIDO for elevated access accounts?
In their case, those were privileged users in a place where they could not bring their phone, and they're on a shared desk. Like, it's not their machine all the time. So they swap machines. And so it's not guaranteed that, Windows Hello for Business with biometric is about 10 profiles on a shared machine. So they had more admins than that.
It might also be you're using your normal work laptop with your IW account, but then to log into the Azure portal to manage some other aspect of your tenant with an elevated key, you could use your FIDO key to complete the authentication to that web-based resource as well.
Okay, thank you.
Matthias?
Yeah, we hear people talk about costs for recovery, help desk calls. It's expensive with passwords. Did we actually do some research about how much it is when you use FIDO or Hello? Is it actually cheaper besides more secure? Is it?
He's a plant. We are actually working to build that data. It's something, again, you saw me say, like, track those metrics. Industry-wide, we are still learning.
We have the data
The
from
costs.
Microsoft, but we're Microsoft pretending claiming that Microsoft saved a lot. But so we're trying to build that industry data.
And get some case studies out later this year.
Yes, sir.
For hybrid deployments, are there any plans to get rid of the hash password store for Active Directory for Windows Hello for Business?
To be a successfully hybrid joined machine, you first have to be a joined machine. So that's in the fabric of AD and Windows, right? So the recommendation we'd give you is to do like Microsoft did and move 99% of your machines, unless they really, really have to be domain hybrid for some reason, to move to Cloud Join, because in Cloud Join, you can avoid having the password be in the fabric of, like, for example, putting aside bootstrapping, even on a day-to-day basis, when you're unlocking the machine, if access to your domain controller is not quite there, you're not on the VPN yet, all that stuff, you're going to have problems, even if you successfully unlock with a FIDO key, you're going to have problems hitting certain things, because you still have to redeem that for a Kerberos ticket, right? And so we can't quite take the password out of the domain join part. And so, I mean, I'm not sure we're investigating any of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, Dana, if you.
Happy to chat with you more offline about your specific use cases, but fundamentally it comes back to these improvements are happening on cloud.
Right, so really just move to Azure joined machines is the way to go.
Highly recommend.
That's our recommendation, yep. Great, thanks. Anyone from online?
I do have a question.
Please go
Sorry,
ahead.
I do have a question from the app. So, are there scenarios where an enterprise realistically has apps that will never or can't be passwordless, and how should an enterprise think about that?
As I mentioned, there are bridging technologies. So we have partnerships with, for example, for HTTP apps, you have F5, you have Palo Alto. We have a whole list of, if you look up Azure AD Secure Hybrid Access Initiative, you will find in our product, for example, we have all these partnerships with app delivery solutions that deliver these legacy apps to their consumers, to their end users, so that they can intercept the requests and do modern authentication, and that's where Passwordless pops in, and then continue the access to the applications. We have other technologies for non-HTTP apps, for example. Again, I'm now answering for our product, but I think the scheme applies to other IDaaS or IDPs, which is we have a partner called Silverfort that intercepts non-HTTP requests. So, for example, file shares. Literally, like the user could be going to a file share on-prem, and what will happen is they will intercept the request on the domain controller and then pop up an authentication UX using a browser on the user's end user machine where they can do FIDO. Like it's a modern prompt now. They can do FIDO, they can do MFA, they can do device auth. Is the device compliant or not? Satisfy all the adaptive auth conditions you set, and then let the call to the domain controller continue. So there are clever ways to kind of embrace some of these older apps to bring them in the fold without rewriting or rebuying or anything.
Thank you. We do have time. I have a couple other questions in here. We do have time. This one, do you have any insight when Microsoft will support remote desktop protocol client enablement for FIDO2?
So with our latest Windows Insider releases, you may now use FIDO key to access Windows virtual desktops and Azure virtual desktops. The intent is to bring that capability also to the remote desktop protocol, but we started first with the more recent deliveries.
So one of the learnings, for example, we talked about earlier is Windows Hello for Business works very well for your first computer, your day-to-day computer. But if your developers need to jump in from that computer to another computer to a third computer, with Windows Hello for Business, there is a way to deploy certificates. But for example, with FIDO, how do I carry that FIDO credential to the next machine and the next machine? So we're doing work right now to make it happen by default in Azure infrastructure. So Azure Virtual Desktop AVD will be able, if you sign into the first machine or to your main machine with a FIDO key, you can carry that into the AVD machine itself. And with Windows 365.
Yeah, Windows Virtual Desktop are
Windows,
new offerings.
As well. And we've heard from customers very loud and clear that they'd also like it for AWS infrastructure that has Windows or Windows Server or on-prem infrastructure. So we're exploring that as well.
Definitely on the roadmap.
Let me just ask this one last question, which is a question that we actually get all the time. Why do we call a PIN passwordless if you are entering a password-like set of characters?
We need another link on our resource, which will take you to the page that says why a PIN is not a password.
But let's give a quick answer. I wish Ravi was here. Ravi wrote a book on it, but basically the PIN is knowledge-based as the password, correct? But the PIN only works on the device. The PIN is not configured in your cloud account. So if I am watching him as he is logging in and I shoulder surf his PIN, I can't use it without also stealing his laptop. Going to an Azure AD sign-in page or Office 365 sign-in page or another computer and typing in his UPN and his PIN will not work. That's the whole point, is it's a PIN that's localized to the device itself. And of course, on the device, it's protected with much better protections than a password. You've got regressive retry, you've got all these things that the TPM chip tries to do to defend against brute forcing and stuff and guessing and stuff.
Thank you. That's a great answer. All right. So please help me to thank Libby and Tarek for their time today and that great presentation.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you.